In this video, we're going to look at how to structure an argument using the ancient method of ENDPRP. ENDPRP is the acronym that we use for the classical speech divisions, or the parts of speech that Aristotle and Cicero identified as being essential in order to deliver the best possible argument. Before we get into using ENDPRP, the most important thing that you need to do when writing your speech is draw out your invention table. Your invention table is where you itemize arguments for and against the motion. So you'll be given a statement usually, or a topic that you need to express your opinion on. For example, you can see here the statement is school uniform should be mandatory for all ages. So all students should have to wear school uniform. In the invention table, you would have a plus side and a minus side. So the plus side of the table, these are the people that would have a big thumbs up for that particular statement. These are people who would agree that school uniform should be mandatory for all ages. So what we then advise you to do is, if you list 2 or 3, ideally 3, arguments on each side. So on the plus side here, we've got the fact that school uniform is smart and promotes respect for the school. It avoids potential judgment of personal choices if you're not wearing your own clothes, and it's cheap and widely available. On the minus side, so far we've only got one argument, which is that it doesn't allow for freedom of expression, and you might add in 1 or 2 of your own there. Have a think about people that would have a thumbs down to that statement. Why would people disagree that school uniform should be mandatory for everybody? Once you've drawn out your invention table, your next job is to choose a side to take in your speech. It's important that you stick to one side. You need to be biased. You need to be partisan in this particular exercise. You don't want to weaken your argument by sitting on the fence. So choose a side. It doesn't always have to be the side that you particularly agree with. Sometimes taking the opposite point of view can allow you to really go to town on a passionate argument. You can almost take on the persona of somebody else. So your exordium is your opening statement. This is the first part of your speech or argument, and this part's essential in grabbing the attention of your audience or your reader. They need to know that you mean business, and they need to know that you are somebody worth listening to. A great way to start in your exordium is by using a question, an anecdote, a little story, or a statistic or piece of information. Reason being that these 3 methods are personable, they're everyday things, and they make people feel at ease straight away. So for example, a simple question that begins with something like, have you ever? If we go back to the uniform idea, you could begin with, have you ever been in a situation whereby you have felt like you didn't have a single ounce of individuality in amongst 1,200 people, or something like that. If you wanted to do an anecdote, a great line to begin with is, let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story about a boy who went to a school that didn't believe in school uniform. That boy went to a school that believed that people should be allowed to express their individuality. And that boy had to decide every morning whether to go to school or not and face ridicule for the trainers that were on his feet, because they were the only ones he could afford, and so on and so on. You can start with a statistic or a piece of information. So if you want to be very political about it, by the time I finish this speech, there would have been another 30,000 cheap white cotton polo shirts produced in sweatshops around the world, that the school system is feeding on a day-to-day basis by insisting that we wear school uniform. Just to be clear, you don't have to tell the truth in your speeches. You don't have to be factually correct. The argument behind that is that nobody's going to fact check you in the exam. So you can afford to stretch the truth a little bit if you so wish. The next stage in your speech is the narration. Now this is where you can build on that sense of trust by explaining a little bit of background to the topic. if you're able to give some information on the topic that you're discussing, people will be able to decide for themselves, but they'll be more convinced that you know what you're talking about if you're able to give a little bit of information about the background to the topic. Now again, this does not have to be true. It can be made up. You can choose information that suits your argument. You can choose to give the statistics, choose to give the dates, and the information that subtly backs up the argument you're about to deliver. But to the audience, what they will see is somebody who knows what they're talking about. So give a little bit of background to the topic in hand. Next comes the division. Now this also links into ethos and the audience's sense of trust, because if you're able to articulate, if you're able to explain in brief the two sides to this story, the two sides to this argument, it shows that you are a balanced individual. You're well aware that there are two sides to this story. You are not for a second standing up in front of them and denying that there are other opinions out there. You are absolutely aware of those, and you've listened to them, you've understood them, and you're able to relay them right now before you deliver your point. So by giving a clear division, by explaining the division, you are able to build that sense of trust in your audience. They trust that you are not one-sided necessarily, and that you are not biased, and that you have done your research. The next section in your argument is the proof. This is the proof section. So this is where you go back to your invention table and you take each of your points in turn and you fill those paragraphs, you fill those statements with rhetorical devices. You take every opportunity to emphasize your point. You take every opportunity to repeat your key ideas. You take every opportunity to persuade that audience using rhetorical techniques that your argument is correct. Really good tip for this. The more you can speak as yourself, the better. The more you speak as if you would talk to other people on a day-to-day basis, if you were having a literal argument with them, you need to sound like you mean it. That doesn't mean be rude, but it means you must sound passionate. You've got to sound like you care. It's really important. Once you've delivered your side of the argument, thinking back to that division, you can't win an argument if you just give your side of the story. You can't win an argument by just stating your case. You must, absolutely must, look at the other side of the argument, but say why they're wrong. And again, don't be rude. There's no need for rudeness. Just subtly start to unravel their points. So you could take one of their points and just point out why this might not be the case. So perhaps this fact might not be necessarily true. Some people say this, but actually when you look at it, maybe there's an alternative way of looking at it. So just start to gently pull apart the opposition. What you will eventually do is, as it says on the slide, you will tear their arguments apart, but you don't need to be violent about it. You can do it very subtly and just pick away. So the final part of your speech or argument is the peroration. So this is the grand finale. This is the moment when the crowd should be on their feet applauding. This is the moment when people stand there and think, yes, this person knows what they're talking about. That was such a good speech. I feel motivated to do something different. I feel inspired to think again about that topic. I feel encouraged to go and do something about this. So your grand finale, you need to think rhetorically about reiterating. So repeat your key points. Use devices such as anaphora to get that repetition in. Use devices such as rhetorical questions to just keep asking the audience, why would you think any other way? Why would you leave this room not agreeing with me? What more could I say to you to put this idea into your mind? So your peroration should leave the audience in no doubt that you are correct. A good tip at this point, when you're delivering your peroration, try and avoid going back to the opposition's argument, because what you want is to almost leave that behind. You want to leave that, you've unpicked it, you've unravelled it, it's in tatters on the floor. Leave that behind. You're done with that. You've dealt with it. Focus your finale on your points and on your proof and reiterate those key points. ENDPRP is the acronym that we use for the classical speech divisions, or the parts of speech that Aristotle and Cicero identified as being essential in order to deliver the best possible argument. So hopefully that helps you remember what ENDPRP stands for and the different parts you've got to include in your argument. So whether you're writing a speech or an article, when you're using ENDPRP, it's a good idea to put your exordium, your narration and your division into your opening paragraph. So what that means is you've got your main setting out of your stall done in the opening paragraph. So that could be roughly half a page. And you've explained why it is you're speaking, you've given the background to the information, you've given the two sides to the story. What that then means is the bulk of your response can be your proof. So we would advise you to write a paragraph for each of your points that you want to make. It's up to you whether you could do all three of your ideas for your side of the argument in separate paragraphs, or maybe you could choose two of those, and then in your third paragraph you could spend some time refuting the opposition's arguments. Equally, you might have one main proof argument, you might do two paragraphs of refutation if there's plenty to unpick on the other side. So the balance doesn't always have to be the same, and you can pick and choose whichever arguments seem to you the best ones to either stand for and deliver or oppose. Choose those. And then the peroration can be really a few lines at the end. It depends how far you want to go with emphasising your points. But overall, the bulk of your response, the bulk of your argument should be in your proof and your refutation. So, enjoy, good luck, ask your teacher for some topics, because then you can practice your invention tables, and then you can have a go at putting your thoughts into your argument. Thanks for watching.